Yo, what's good, Commanders Nation? Welcome back to the channel where we live and breathe burgundy and gold 24/7. Today is Thursday, January 29th, 2026, and bro, we gotta talk about three stories that are shaking up everything in Washington. And when I say everything, I mean everything. We're talking about potential trades that could flip our secondary, free agents turning us down live on air. Yeah, it's that brutal. And coaches already packing their bags for Pittsburgh. Listen, fam, after how our 2025 season ended, we all knew changes were coming. But what's happening right now is bigger than most expected. The truth is, this offseason is going to define whether we were just a one-hit wonder in 2024, or if we're building something real, something sustainable, something that can compete year after year. And each of these three stories gives us clues about which direction we're heading. So buckle up, because we're breaking down every detail, every tactical implication, every financial move, and every coaching decision Dan Quinn and Adam Peters are making or should be making to get this franchise back to what it was in 2024. And bro, I'm not gonna lie, some of this news has me hyped, some has me worried, but all of it has me thinking this offseason is going to be crucial. Let's get into it. Bro, we're starting off strong. Mike Moritas from Fansided just dropped a bomb a few hours ago. The Kansas City Chiefs might be willing to trade Trent McDuffie. And guess who's showing up as a logical landing spot? Yup, us, the Washington Commanders. And before anyone says, nah, that's just clickbait, let me break down why this makes all the sense in the world, both from our side and Kansas City single quotes S. First, let's talk about our cornerback situation because, fam, it was an absolute disaster in 2025. We gave up the fifth most passing yards per game in the entire league. Fifth. That's unacceptable for a team that's supposed to have Dan Quinn, one of the best defensive minds in the NFL, as head coach. But here's the problem. Our cornerback room is old, banged up, and full of giant question marks. Jonathan Jones, who was our slot corner, is a free agent and already 31. Noah Igbinoghene, who never really found his place in our system, is also a free agent and probably not coming back. And Marshon Lattimore. Bro, let me talk to you about Lattimore, because this is important. When we traded for him from New Orleans midseason in 2024, we all thought he was the missing piece. A four-time Pro Bowler, a guy who had been elite for years. But the reality was completely different. Lattimore came in hurt, played like 5 total snaps the entire second half of the season. And now he's heading into the final year of a massive contract that pays around $31 million. Fam, there's no way in the world we're paying that. It's basically a stone-cold lock he's getting cut. And when that happens, we're going to have a huge hole in our secondary. And it's not just a talent hole. It's a leadership hole, an experience hole, someone who can be your number one corner and let everyone else play in more comfortable roles. That's where Trent McDuffie comes in. And bro, this man is exactly what we need. He's 25, in the final year of his rookie deal worth $13 million, and already has 2 Super Bowl rings. Let that sink in for a second. 2 rings at 25. And it's not like he was just along for the ride in those championship runs. McDuffie was a key piece in both of Kansas City's playoff pushes. But let me explain what makes McDuffie so special. Because it's not just that he's good. It's that his skill set is tailor-made for what Dan Quinn and now Deronte Jones want to do defensively. McDuffie has inside-outside versatility, meaning he can play as your boundary corner outside or slide into the slot in nickel situations. That kind of flexibility is invaluable in today's NFL, where offenses are constantly trying to create mismatches. His press coverage technique is among the best in the league. The man can jam receivers at the line, disrupt timing, force quarterbacks to hold the ball an extra second. And in the NFL, 1 extra second is the difference between a sack and a touchdown. But what I really love about McDuffie is his football IQ. This guy understands route concepts, can anticipate breaks, read the quarterback's eyes, and has incredible ball instincts. In his 3 years with Kansas City, he's racked up 8 interceptions and 33 pass breakups. Those are elite cornerback numbers, Dot. And here's the tactical part that gets me most excited. McDuffie is excellent in zone coverage. And if you know anything about Dan Quinn's defensive philosophy, you know he loves to run cover 3, cover 2, and zone variations. Quinn isn't a pure man coverage coach like some other DCs in the league. You want smart corners who can play with vision, see the whole field, and make plays on the ball when it comes into their zone. McDuffie is perfect for that, Dot, but he can also play man when needed. On 3rd and long, in 2-minute drills when you need to lock down the opposing WR1, McDuffie can do that too. That kind of coverage versatility is what separates good corners from elite ones. And bro, McDuffie is in that elite tier. Now, let's talk about why Kansas City would even consider trading him, because this is where it gets really interesting. The Chiefs had a horrible 2025 season, and I'm not exaggerating. They missed the playoffs for the first time since 2015. Patrick Mahomes had the worst statistical year of his career. Their defense, which had been top 10 for years, completely collapsed. It was a disaster class from start to finish, and to make things worse, Kansas City is in a financial nightmare. They're projected to be $62.5 million over the salary cap in 2026. Yeah, you read that right. $62.5 million over the cap. That means they have to cut players, restructure deals, and probably trade some of their best assets just to sign their draft class. Brett Veach, Kansas City's GM, is gonna have to make some brutal decisions this offseason. And one of those decisions could be about Trent McDuffie. Because here's the reality. McDuffie is in the final year of his rookie deal. He's going to want an extension, and that extension is probably going to be in the $18 to $20 million per year range, which is what top corners are getting right now. Can the Chiefs afford that with their cap situation? Technically, yes, but it would mean sacrificing other positions. And here's where the Chiefs' history becomes relevant. Kansas City has a track record of trading corners instead of paying them. Remember Marcus Peters? Traded to the Rams in 2018 when he was about to need an extension. Remember Jarius Sneed? Traded to the Titans last year for the same reason. The Chiefs have a clear philosophy. They don't pay corners. They'd rather invest that money in their offensive line, their pass rush, or weapons for MAHOME stock. So the logic is there, fam. The Chiefs desperately need to free up cap space. McDuffie needs a big extension. We need a young, elite corner. It's a perfect match from a team-building perspective. Now, let's talk about the cost to acquire him, because this matters. Since McDuffie is in the final year of his deal, and the Chiefs are in cap hell, it shouldn't cost a fortune to trade for him. I'm estimating we're talking about a second-round pick, maybe a conditional third that becomes a second if McDuffie signs an extension with us. That's nothing compared to what you pay for a corner of his caliber in free agency or trying to draft one. Think about it like this. If you want to get a cornerback like McDuffie in the draft, you probably need a top 10 pick. We don't have that. And if you try to sign one in free agency, you're paying $20+ million per year for someone who's probably 28 or 29 and already on the decline. McDuffie is 25. Entering his prime and could be our number. One corner for the next 6 or 7 years, and here's the best part, bro. We can afford him. Washington has a relatively healthy cap situation over the next few years. According to Over the Cap, we're projected to have around $45 million in cap space this offseason. That's enough to give McDuffie an $18 to $20 million per year extension and still have money to sign other free agents or extend our own guys like Terry McLaurin or Darren Payne. Adam Peters, our GM, is a smart dude. He came from San Francisco, where he helped build one of the best rosters in the NFL. He understands the value of young elite corners. He knows that in today's NFL, where 70% of the game is passing, you need corners who can cover. And if McDuffie is available for a second-round pick, Peters should be sprinting to the phone to make that deal. But beyond the numbers and the financial logic, think about what McDuffie brings to this team: playoff experience, a winning mindset, a player who's been in the biggest moments in the sport and shine. That's invaluable for a young roster like ours. Jaden Daniels is 24. Most of our key players are in their first 3 or 4 years in the league. Having someone like McDuffie, who's already won 2 Super Bowls, who knows what it takes to compete at the highest level, that changes the locker room culture. And from a tactical standpoint, imagine this: McDuffie locking down the opposing WR1, allowing other DBs to focus on more specific roles. Suddenly, your safety doesn't have to shade toward the number 1 receiver all the time. Suddenly, your other corner can play more aggressively because he knows McDuffie has his side locked down. Suddenly, Deronte Jones, our new DC, can get more creative with blitzes, can play more man coverage, can disguise coverages better because he's got someone reliable on the island. That's what an elite corner does, bro. They don't just elevate their own play, they elevate everyone around them. The D-line can get home on pass rushes because the QB has to hold the ball longer. The linebackers can drop into better zones because they don't have to worry about helping over the top. The whole defense functions better when you've got a corner who can genuinely shut down a receiver. And look, I know some fans are gonna say, but bro, what if we trade for him, give him a massive extension, and he gets hurt? And that's a valid concern. But here's the reality: every player has injury risk. Lattimore got hurt. Benjamin St. just got hurt. Emmanuel Forbes was a bust. At some point, you have to take a calculated risk on a player who has the talent and the track record. And McDuffie has both. His 3 years in Kansas City have been relatively healthy. No major injuries, no medical red flags. And at 25, he's right in that sweet spot where his body is mature but hasn't accumulated the wear and tear that veterans in their late 20s or early 30s have. So yeah, fam, I'm all in on this trade. If the Chiefs make McDuffie available, we should be first in line. Offer them a second, maybe a conditional third, and get the deal done. Then immediately work on a 5-year, $90 million extension with $50 million guaranteed. That keeps him in Washington until he's 30, which is exactly the timeline we want. And think about it in the context of our rebuild. Jaden Daniels is on his rookie deal for 3 more years. That's our window to build a contender before we have to pay him $50+ million per year. McDuffie in his prime, playing alongside Jaden in his prime, with Terry McLaurin still elite, with an improved offensive line, with a defense that can finally stop somebody. Bro, that's a recipe for a Super Bowl contender. But this has to happen now. We can't wait until the draft. We can't wait until free agency. If McDuffie is available, Peters needs to make it happen. Because opportunities like this don't come around often. A 25-year-old corner with 2 rings entering his prime, available for a second-round pick. That's a no-brainer. FAM. And if Kansas City decides not to trade him, if they find other ways to clear cap space and keep McDuffie, then okay, I get it. But if I'm Brett Veach, staring at that $62.5 million cap overage, looking at all the tough decisions I've got to make, trading McDuffie for a second and using that cap space elsewhere makes a lot of sense. So keep your eyes on this one, Commanders Nation. Because if this trade goes down, it could be the most important move of our offseason. And in an offseason where we need to make a lot of right moves, this will be an absolute home run. All right, bro, we're going from an exciting headline to one that's, well, a little disappointing, but also totally understandable when you think about it. DeAndre Hopkins, the 5-time Pro Bowl wide receiver currently with the Baltimore Ravens and set to hit free agency this offseason, basically told us, nah, I'm good, in a recent interview on Pardon My Take. And fam, the way he said it was almost comically honest. Let me give you the full context because this story has layers. Hopkins grew up in the Carolinas, specifically South Carolina, before the Carolina Panthers even existed. Back then, if you lived in the Carolinas and wanted to follow an NFL team, you basically had to choose between the Washington Redskins or the Atlanta Falcons. Hopkins chose the Redskins, and for years he was a fan of the team. So when the host of Pardon My Take PFT commenter, a massive Commanders fan, and Big Cat asked him if he'd ever want to play for Washington at some point in his career, we all expected him to say something diplomatic like, "You never know. It'd be an honor," or something like that. But bro, Hopkins was brutally honest. He smiled and said, "I like Washington as a city. Good food, good restaurants. But I'm not sure. I grew up a Redskins fan, so I think that's enough for me." Bro, dramatic pause. That's basically saying, I already lived my childhood dream being a fan from the stands. I don't need to live it on the field. It's like he's saying, my relationship with Washington is perfect the way it is. I don't want to ruin it by playing there and possibly having a bad experience. And when PFT commenter, clearly a little hurt by the answer, pushed with a please, "We'd love to have you in D.C., Hopkins got even more direct. "Y'all already got enough receivers. You got Debo, you got Scary Terry. You're good. You don't need this old guy." And fam, you gotta give Hopkins credit for that response because it shows self-awareness. The man knows he's 34, turning 35 in June. He knows he's not the same player he was in Houston when he was a top 3 receiver in the league. He knows his role now is different. And instead of chasing one last big paycheck on a team that doesn't really need him, he's being real about his situation. But let's unpack this because there's a lot to analyze here. And I think this situation tells us a lot about where we are as a franchise and what kind of players we should be targeting in free agency. First off, Hopkins is partially right about our receiver situation. We do have Terry McLaurin, who when healthy is still one of the top 15 to 20 receivers in the league. Terry is 30, but he still has speed, still runs elite routes, still has those incredible hands that have made him so reliable his whole career. The problem in 2025 wasn't Terry. It was that our entire offense collapsed, and he didn't get the same opportunities he had in 2020-4. And Hopkins mentioned Debo Samuel, but here's the detail he probably doesn't. No, or maybe he does and was just being diplomatic. Debo is a free agent too. His contract with San Francisco expired. We signed him in 2025, and now he's hitting the market again. And there are serious question marks about whether we're going to re-sign him. Debo had a decent year with us, not spectacular, but solid. The issue is, he's going to want a deal in the $20 to $22 million per year range. And with all the other needs we have, especially on defense, can we really justify paying that for a 30-year-old receiver who's clearly not in his prime anymore? Personally, I don't think so. I think Debo was a good rental for 2025, but moving forward, we need to invest that money elsewhere, which means YES. We are going to need another receiver to line up opposite Terry. But here's the question. Should it be DeAndre Hopkins? And my answer, fam, is a hard nitrogen monoxide. And let me explain why with some tactical and roster building details. Hopkins is 34 and hasn't topped 620 yards in either of the last 2 seasons. In 2024 with Tennessee, he had 592 yards and 4 touchdowns in 15 games. In 2025 with Baltimore, he had 618 yards and 5 touchdowns in 16 games. Those are WR3 numbers maybe. Low-end WR2 on a good day. Not the kind of numbers you pay $10+ million per year for, which is probably what Hopkins will be looking for in free agency. But beyond the numbers, let's talk about the type of receiver Hopkins is and why he doesn't fit what we need. Hopkins was never a speed guy, not even in his prime. He's always been more of a possession receiver, a guy who wins with route running, insane body control, and elite hands in contested catch situations. His specialty was making those 50-50 grabs where the defender is right there, But Hopkins somehow comes down with the ball, and that's valuable. Don't get me wrong. There are situations where you need that kind of receiver. But is that what our offense needs in 2026? Absolutely not. What we need is speed. We need a receiver who can stretch the field vertically, who can create separation with speed, who can be a constant deep ball threat for Jaden Daniels. Because here's the problem we had in 2025. Teams didn't respect us deep. They knew Terry was our only real vertical threat, so they doubled him and forced Jaden to check down or try to make plays with his legs. If we add Hopkins, we don't fix that problem. Hopkins isn't scaring anyone with speed. Defenses will play the same coverage they played against us all 2025. Double Terry, put a safety over the top, and there are other receivers to beat single coverage. And Hopkins at 34 isn't consistently beating young athletic corners in single coverage. What we do need is someone like, and I'm just throwing out names here, T. Higgins in free agency if Cincinnati doesn't re-sign him. Higgins is 27, has size 6'4", or Chris Godwin from Tampa if he recovers well from his ACL tear. Godwin is 30, but still has juice, still creates separation, still makes plays after the catch. Or better yet, go to the draft and grab a young receiver who can grow with Jaden. This draft class is loaded with receiver talent. Luther Burden III from Missouri is an incredible playmaker who can line up in the slot or outside. Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State is a polished route runner who can contribute right away. Teteroa McMillan from Arizona is a physical freak who could be a WR1 in the NFL. Any of those guys would be a better investment than Hopkins because they're at the beginning of their careers, not the end. And here's the other thing. With Jaden on his rookie deal for 3 more years, we need to maximize that window. We can't waste years with veterans who are clearly declining. We need to build a young core that can grow together and peak at the same time. And look, I'm not hating on Hopkins. The man is a legend. Future first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt. One of the best receivers of his generation. But from a roster building perspective for Washington in 2026, it just doesn't make sense. And honestly, I think he knows that. That's why he was so direct in his response on Pardon My Take. Hopkins wasn't rude. He wasn't disrespectful. He was just honest. And I respect that way more than if he had given some generic PR answer like, oh, Washington's a great organization. You never know what could happen. He kept it real, and in a league where everyone's always giving canned answers, that's refreshing. Now, the elephant in the room we have to address, Deebo Samuel, and what we do at that position. Because if we don't re-sign Deebo, which is my prediction, then YES, we need another receiver. And we basically have 3 options. Option 1, free agency. Target someone like T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, or maybe Cortland Sutton if Denver lets him walk. These guys will be expensive, probably $15 to $20 million per year, but at least they're in their late 20s or early 30s and still have something left in the tank. Option 2, the draft. Use a 2nd or 3rd round pick on a receiver. Like I mentioned, this class is deep. You could get a real contributor in the 2nd round. And the benefit is they'd be on a cheap rookie deal for 4 years, which gives us financial flexibility. Option 3, a trade. Similar to the McDuffie situation, maybe there's a young receiver on another team who's available for the right price. Or Quentin Johnston in LA if he doesn't fit their system. Personally, I go with option 2 or 3. Free agency for receivers is always tricky because you're paying top dollar for past production, not future. I don't know if we can afford to drop $20 million on a receiver when we could use that money on an edge, rusher, or a safety. And here's the other consideration. David Blau, our new offensive coordinator. Blau was the assistant QB's coach, so we don't have a real track record of what kind of offense he wants to run. But based on conversations with people around the organization, it sounds like he wants to implement a more balanced, creative system, more RPOs, more play action, More designs that get receivers open through scheme instead of just relying on pure talent. If that's the case, then maybe we don't need a star receiver. Maybe we need 3 or 4 solid receivers who can all contribute instead of 1 or 2 stars. That would be more in line with what San Francisco did for years under Kyle Shanahan, where guys like Kendrick Bourne and Brandon Ayuk had success, not because they were superstars, but because the scheme put them in positions to succeed. So when I look at the whole picture, Hopkins saying no to Washington is probably a blessing in disguise. It forces us to look in other directions, to consider younger options, to build for the future instead of trying to patch holes with declining veterans. And in the long run, that's going to make us a better team. But bro, I'm not going to lie. It was kind of funny seeing PFT commenters so devastated on that podcast. The man genuinely thought he could convince Hopkins right there on the spot. And Hopkins just shut it down with that smile and that, nah, I'm good. Respect to Hopkins for keeping it real. And to wrap it up, fam, we've got the first official departure from the coaching staff following the coordinator shakeups. Jason Simmons, our defensive pass game coordinator, is heading to Pittsburgh to join Mike McCarthy's staff as the new head coach and Patrick Graham as the new defensive coordinator. And while this might seem like a minor headline on the surface, I actually think it's pretty significant because it shows that the changes in Washington are just getting started. Let me give you the full context on who Jason Simmons is and why. This matters. Simmons played safety in the NFL for 13 years from 1998 to 2010. He spent 4 of those years in Pittsburgh, 1998 to 2001. So for him, this is kind of like going back home. After retiring, he got into coaching and worked in several places before landing in Washington in 2024 when Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. were hired. His role with us was defensive pass game coordinator, which basically means he was responsible for helping design our coverages, prepping game plans specifically against opposing passing attacks, and developing our defensive backs, especially the safeties, which is his area of expertise. And look, to be completely honest, Simmons did a decent job. Not amazing, not terrible, just decent. But here's the problem. Decent isn't good enough when your defense gives up the 5th most passing yards in the league. Clearly, something wasn't working, and part of that falls on the coaches. Now, it's important to understand that Simmons wasn't the only one responsible. Joe Witt Jr., as DC, deserves more of the blame. Dan Quinn, as head coach, also deserves blame for not stepping in sooner. But Simmons, as pass game coordinator, definitely shares responsibility for why our DBs were constantly out of position, why our coverages were getting shredded, and why we couldn't adjust to what offenses were doing against us. So when Quinn fired Witt and brought in Daronte Jones as the new DC, it was inevitable that more changes would follow. Jones is going to want to bring in his own guys, coaches he's worked with before, people who understand his defensive philosophy and can implement it effectively. And Simmons, who was more aligned with Witt's scheme, probably saw the writing on the wall. He knew his role was going to change, maybe be reduced, maybe eliminated entirely. So when Pittsburgh called with an opportunity to join a staff with Mike McCarthy, a Super Bowl winning head coach, and Patrick Graham, a highly respected DC who's had success in multiple organizations, Simmons made the smart move and took the opportunity. And honestly, I don't blame him. Pittsburgh is a first-class organization. They've got a history of winning, a culture of excellence, and an incredible fan base. For Simmons, who played there and probably still has connections in the city, this is almost a dream scenario. And from a career progression standpoint, working with Graham could be great for him because Graham has a reputation for developing coaches and helping them move up in their careers. But bro, this is just the beginning of the changes we're going to see. Scott Jennings from Hogs Haven, one of the most connected insiders with the team, reported that there will be many more changes on both the defensive and offensive staff. And that makes total sense when you think about it. Look at our current defensive staff. DC, Daronte Jones new, came from Minnesota senior defensive assistant. John Pagano, been in the league forever. Very respected. DBS coach. Tommy Donatello, came with Quinn in 2024. Assistant DBs. William Gay, former player. Young coach, LBS coach. Ken Norton Jr., former DC. Tons of experience. Assistant LBS pass rush specialist. Now vacant with Simmons leaving. DO coach. Daryl Tapp, former player. Been with us a few years, assistant DL. Sheriff Floyd, former player. Relatively new to coaching. Defensive quality control. George Banco, young coach. Analytics guy. Out of all those names, I'd expect at least 2 or 3 more to be replaced in the coming weeks. Probably Tommy Donatello's DB's coach is the most likely, because Jones is going to want to bring in someone he's worked with before for that position. In Minnesota, he worked closely with Darren Miles as the DB's coach, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Miles or another coach from Minnesota follow. Jones to Washington. Ken Norton Jr. as LBS coach is another one who could be on the way out. Norton is a great coach with tons of experience, but he was also very close with Witt. And if Jones wants to implement a completely different scheme for the linebackers, he might want his own guy there too. And here's the thing, fam. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you need a complete refresh to change the culture and the mindset. Our defense in 2025 was terrible. It wasn't just that we gave up a lot of yards. It was that we didn't improve over the course of the season. The same mistakes we were making in Week 1, we were still making in Week 17. That's a coaching problem. We didn't generate enough pass rush despite having Dante Fowler Jr. and Dorrance Armstrong. Our DBs were constantly getting beat. Deep, our linebackers couldn't cover tight ends or running backs out of the backfield. Our tackling was atrocious. These are all things that good coaching should be able to fix during the season. And it didn't happen. So if Daronte Jones comes in and says, I need my own staff, I need guys who understand what I want to do and can teach it effectively, then Dan Quinn should give him that. Because at the end of the day, Quinn hired Jones to fix the defense. And Jones needs the tools to do that. Now, the question is, who's going to replace Simmons as pass game coordinator? Because that role is important, especially in today's NFL where 70% of the game is passing. Jones needs someone who understands root concepts deeply, who can identify quarterback and offensive tendencies, who knows how to adjust coverages in real time based on what they're seeing. My prediction is that Jones brings someone from Minnesota or someone who already knows his system, who can implement it quickly without needing months of teaching, and who has a track record of developing DBs. Because, we desperately need to develop our young cornerbacks and safeties. If we bring in McDuffie in that trade we talked about earlier, that helps massively. But we still need depth. We still need to develop guys like Emmanuel Forbes, if he's still on the roster, or any DBs we draft this year. And that requires good coaching, good teaching, good development. And here's the other consideration. With all these coaching changes, there's going to be a learning curve. Jones is going to need time to implement his scheme. The players are going to need time to learn it. That means, realistically, our defense in 2026 might struggle early in the season while everyone adjusts. But hopefully, by midseason, things start to click. Jones has a better feel for which players fit best in which roles. Adjustments happen faster. And by the time we hit the second half of the season and potentially the playoffs, we're playing good. Defense again. That's the hope, at least. We can't be giving up 400-plus passing yards to mediocre quarterbacks. We can't be getting torched by tight ends every single week. We can't have our DBs looking lost in coverage. That has to change, and these coaching changes are the first step in making that happen. So yeah, Jason Simmons leaving is just the beginning. Expect more coaches to leave in the coming weeks. Expect Jones to bring in several of his own guys. And expect a completely different look and feel for our defense in 2026. Whether that's good or bad, we'll have to wait and see. But at least we're trying something different, because what we did in 2025 clearly didn't work. Bro, fam, listen. These three stories make one thing crystal clear. Washington is in rebuild mode within the rebuild. There's still a lot of work to do. And Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, and the whole organization know it. The potential trade for Trent McDuffie is exactly the kind of aggressive, strategic move we need to make. A young elite cornerback with championship experience, versatility, and all the traits you need in today's NFL. That's how you build long-term contenders. Can be the foundation of your defense for years. DeAndre Hopkins saying no is. Well, it is what it is. And honestly, after thinking about it deeply, it's probably for the best for both sides. We need to invest in youth and speed, not nostalgia and name recognition. We need to build a receiving corps that can grow with Jaden, that can be dynamic and explosive, that can scare defenses with speed and playmaking ability. And Jason Simmons heading to Pittsburgh is just the first of several coaching changes we'll see. Daronte Jones is going to reshape that defensive staff, completely bringing in his own guys, implementing his own system, and hopefully fixing all the problems we had in 2025. Fam, there's a plan. We're not panicking. We're not making desperate moves. We're not trying to patch holes with expensive free agents who are clearly declining. We're being strategic. We're being smart. We're thinking long-term. Adam Peters is building a sustainable contender, not a one-year wonder. Jaden Daniels is our franchise quarterback, and he showed in 2024 that he can be special. Terry McLaurin is still elite when healthy. Our offensive line is improving. We've got draft capital to add talent. We've got cap space to make smart signings. All the pieces are there to build something special, but we need to fix that defense. We need to get younger and more athletic in the secondary. We need to find a pass rush that can consistently get home. We need linebackers who can cover in space. We need a defensive scheme that puts players in position to succeed. And the moves. We're talking about today McDuffie trade, coaching changes, potentially drafting DBs are all steps in that direction. So yeah, it's an off-season of change. It's an off-season of uncertainty. Peters helped build San Francisco into a dynasty. If you made it this far, if you stuck through this deep dive into all this news, then you're a real Commanders fan. And I appreciate you. Drop a like. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we're dropping content every day. And let me know down in the comments. Do you want us to trade for Trent McDuffie? What price would you pay? What receiver should we target in free agency? Or the draft? Do you trust Daronte Jones as our new DC? What other coaching changes do you expect to see? I want to hear everything, bro. All your opinions, all your takes, because at the end of the day, this is OUR team. It's us, Commanders Nation, riding through the highs and the lows. See y'all tomorrow with more news, more deep analysis, and more hype. Because no matter what happens, no matter how many changes come, we're still fans of this team. Keep it a buck, stay locked in, and let's get this franchise back to where it belongs. HTTR fam, peace.